gets it right, he can do something very positive.
And finally, Professor, just two questions, and please choose the extent to which you answer. If you want to answer either of them. Some experts from the audience were curious about what you thought the future of the U.S. currency might be, and how important deficit financing and military spending is for the U.S. economy. That's the economic question. And the other one is, what is your opinion about color revolutions in Georgia, Armenia, and for some people it's movement towards democracy, towards the West, liberal order, and for some others it's not exactly that. It's subversion. So what do you think of that? And do you really think that it's necessary for small countries like that to choose between the West, the East, and the West? And again, you determine the extent to which you'd like to answer.
The role of the U.S. dollar in the world economy will surely diminish in the next 10 years, maybe very sharply, in fact. The role of the Chinese currency, the yuan, will surely rise in the next 10 years a lot, because Russia and China will trade in yuan, because the BRICS countries will trade in national currencies, of which the Chinese currency will be the most important, because the U.S. confiscated Russia's reserves. Dumb move. You know, if you say, use our money, but if we don't like you, we take it away, other countries won't use your money. And it's not just the 300 billion of Russian assets that were frozen, but also Venezuelan assets, Iranian assets, Afghan assets, North Korean assets. So the U.S. has a bad habit. It forgot about property rights of other countries. And therefore, other countries do not, and in fact, even cannot deal in dollars. It's very interesting. The way the sanctions on Russia work, as I'm sure you know well, and probably better than I, is if you want to buy something from Russia, it's not so easy. And you certainly can't go to your bank and get a bank transaction to do it. And I was in Mongolia recently. Mongolia is, in a very interesting geography between Russia and China. It needs to trade with Russia, but all its banks are part of the SWIFT system. And so no bank will do any banking services for trade with Russia. And this is true in many parts of the world. Obviously the same with Iran. So it's not technically very hard to come up with alternatives. It can't be that your bank opens a separate ruble account because it will get sanctioned. It has to be that Sberbank or some other new bank that doesn't have anything to do with dollars opens up ruble accounts, and then it can't be sanctioned because the U.S. can't reach it by cutting it out of the SWIFT system. This is going to happen for sure. Why not? It's so easy. Russia's not going to just sit there and not trade with the rest of the world. China's not just going to sit there and let the U.S. threaten it with secondary sanctions. So there will be a big shift out of the U.S. dollar. It will make life harder for the United States, because what you get when other countries use your currency is the ability to borrow on very favorable terms, thank you, because other countries are holding your treasury bills as their foreign exchange reserves. And so they buy them at very low interest rates. But this is already going away, and the interest rates that the U.S. has to pay on its treasury debt is rising. And it happens that the U.S. has a lot of public debt. America's public debt as a share of national income is higher than your public debt as a share of national income. So America has a lot of debt. The interest rates are rising. The budget deficit is enormous because our political system is very corrupt. And so we have billionaires support the Democrats and billionaires support the Republicans. And what policy emerges? Billionaire policy. Doesn't matter who. Billionaire policy means tax cuts for the billionaires. So we don't even raise revenues for the government. So the government deficit is large, the interest rates are rising, the dollar is diminishing in use. Trump may not like that, but I'm sorry, Mr. Trump, it's not up to you. And it's going to accelerate. And I think this administration, if it follows kind of Trump 1 policies, it's going to have a very hard time economically. They don't know it yet. They think that because they control both houses of Congress, things will sail through. But they don't have answers to any of these questions. They want to give more tax cuts on a huge budget deficit with a declining role of the U.S. dollar. So stay tuned. The pieces don't fit together, and there's no intelligent discussion in the U.S. political scene about this. It will just hit them as reality, not because of anybody properly anticipating or understanding these things. My basic idea about geopolitics is stay out of the other country's lane. Don't interfere in the internal politics of other countries. This is actually a doctrine of international law. The UN General Assembly votes for this doctrine. It's called the doctrine of non-intervention. And they say, don't intervene. This is what China emphasizes above all. We are nations, we abide by the UN Charter, we follow peace, but do not intervene in my internal affairs. This is the main demand of China. And if you have suffered the first Opium War, the second Opium War, the Boxer Rebellion, the lousy settlement at Versailles, the Sino-Japanese War, the Japanese invasion, China doesn't want to be bothered by the United States or anyone else internally. I don't think it wants to make war outside. It just doesn't want to be bothered inside. Okay, now this comes to the question of how the U.S. behaves. The U.S. overthrows governments for a living. There's a very good book called Covert Regime Change. Covert Regime Change, published in 2017, that documents 64 covert regime change operations of the United States between 1947, when the CIA was created, and 1989. And the author did a very good job, and she said, I stop in 89 because much has been declassified. If I go to the present, I am operating on a hunch. I can't prove things. My experience is the U.S. keeps overthrowing governments or trying to overthrow governments pretty much nonstop, partly because Netanyahu tells them to, which is not a very good reason, but it's a major reason in U.S. politics. So I want the U.S. to stop interfering in the internal affairs of other countries. If I were running things, I would close the National Endowment for Democracy, for example, because that's used to fund organizations that are engaged in domestic politics. I don't believe in that. If another country did that, we'd have a scandal in the United States. But the U.S. does it everywhere in the world. So to my mind, I don't believe in it. I don't like NGOs that are paying political candidates, giving political advice, owning media or social media that are engaged in politics. Let that be your own choice, not anyone else's choice. And one of the reasons is it's it's not America's business, number one. But second, America will make a mess because they don't know anything about Armenia or this region. Honestly, they don't. So you don't even want the meddling because they're likely to trigger all sorts of terrible things and misunderstandings and reactions and counter-reactions. You're the one that understands this region. Keep your politics safe and prudent and careful, but say to the outsiders, stay away, let us have our own politics. So this is my understanding of this. I have seen the U.S. meddling close up by accident. This is not my field. I'm not in regime change. I'm an economist. I have seen, for example, a president saying to me, they're going to take me out. They're going to overthrow me, meaning the U.S. And I, being naive, Jeffrey Sach, said, no, Mr. President, everything's going to be fine. And then the CIA walked this president to an unmarked plane and flew him 23 hours to the Central African Republic in an overthrow. I'm referring to a coup in Haiti. Unbelievable. And you know what the press did about it in the U.S.? Nothing. Didn't even mention it. Because the New York Times is, if nothing, it's loyal to our security state. So it didn't see fit to even tell the story of an American coup in broad daylight. So all of this is to say, can we just have a nice talk together? Can we have coffee together? Could we even plan some roads and some rail and some fiber and some zero carbon power together? Can we stop trying to angle to defeat this one and win this one and so forth? Because this is taking us only closer and closer to disaster. So I want the intervention to stop. I want the meddling to stop. I want Armenia to have a thriving democracy, and I want it to deal with all its neighbors, the ones you like, the ones you don't like, the ones you have a bad history with, the ones you have a good history with. In fact, all of your neighbors have been in trouble at some point in the last 2,600 years. All of them. And somehow you're all here. It's quite remarkable. You're one of the oldest nations on the whole planet. So this is very inspiring. And I'm sure that you will be the ones to continue that success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think it's a great note to end with. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. I hope we haven't overdone it.
No, that's
fine. This is it. That's it for
okay,
today.
great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.